the learning need analysis represents the essential condition to successfully design training paths. In fact, without a preliminary analysis about the actual target needs, it would not be possible to define the course's objectives and the expected results. Our objective is give an operational answer to a widespread need companies and organizations often incur into: how to combine learning activities and strategic objectives by identifying an actual learning need analysis method. For this purpose, we propose a procedural model based on a quantitative investigation model articulated in 3 phases: an operational definition of the learning need concept, a description of the analysis method and its implementation phases, an application of the model to a concrete case study. In order to provide an effective and complete definition of the learning need concept, let's start from the general definition and try to reach a more specific and operational explanation. Considering organizations as the reference frame, the learning need can be defined as an integrated system of knowledge and abilities subjects must and can acquire through formal, informal and non-formal learning processes. The aim is operating in a competent way, coherently with their activities and in accordance with the strategic objectives and the organization value system. But, in order to conduct a quantitative analysis, we have to take into account some considerations about the learning need measurability. First of all, we must define the distinction between actual and real learning need. Then we have to describe the meaning of these 2 variables in the learning effectiveness definition. The virtual learning need coincides with the whole competencies system a subject should get to coherently operate with the organization objectives. The real learning need represents a subset of the virtual learning need and covers all knowledge and abilities still not acquired at the moment the analysis is carried out. It is the difference between virtual learning need and the actual competencies system of the organization members. Of this distinction, it possible to pass the mere subjective dimension of the learning need in favor of a more objective dimension. This way, we'll be able to photograph the actual situation and taking into account all the affecting design factors. Obviates the risk of redundancy and helps to overcome the actual existing gaps. Determining the real learning need represents a necessary condition to design effective learning paths. In fact, the learning effectiveness of a course equals the ratio between the DDD value of the course, the difference between final and initial competency system, and the real learning need, the difference between virtual and initial competencies system. This integration defines the connection between effectiveness and learning need. Now the real learning need can be defined as the difference between 2 systems, the knowledge abilities integrated system subjects must acquire through formal, informal and non-formal learning processes. In order to get competent behaviors within the organization, subjects must perform specific activities related to precise functions and in accordance with the organization's strategic objectives and value system. The actual knowledge system previously acquired and assessed. The analysis method we propose includes 5 activities aimed at identifying the real learning need: declination of the organization's strategic objectives in expected outcomes, declination of the general expected outcomes in individual professional objectives, definition and selection of the target competencies development plan, representation of the virtual learning need, definition of the real learning need. The first phase consists of identifying a series of expected outcomes. In this phase, all the information about the organization's structure, its mission and values must be analyzed. The definition of a grid containing the expected outcomes and their indicators represents the starting point of the learning need analysis. The second phase aims to decline the expected outcomes in individual professional objectives. In order to that, it is necessary to study with attention the internal process map and determine how and how much the development and reorganization strategies affect productive processes and actors involved. The third phase foresees the definition and the selection of the target by cross-reading the competencies map, the individual objectives and the organizational processes. This kind of analysis requires a direct connection with the human resource department and implies a high awareness about the competencies model determining the assessment strategies of the organization members' performances. In the fourth phase, the competencies must be broken down in order to identify the actual learning need, that is, the knowledge and abilities integrated system subjects must acquire in order to competently behave within the organization. So, a formal structure of learning objectives it must be defined. According to Mager learning objective definition, the structure must include the observable behavior hierarchy, the dependence and subordination relation, the nature of the knowledge required to carry out the expected activities, the complexity level of the abilities to functionally elaborate the information, the logical sequence of the behaviors. The objective of the last phase is determining in a rigorous way the real learning need related to some members of the organization. For this purpose, the analysis foresees some activities to verify the system initial conditions, that is, the knowledge, abilities, background of the target. At last, the real learning need can be described through the representation method of the learning objective tree. Now, suppose the objective of the learning need analysis is to define the guidelines to design a master degree addressed to instructional designers. In order to define how our reference field was composed, and describe the characteristics of an organization type, we analyzed the several organizations. Now, let's describe how we applied the learning need analysis model to this case. In the first phase, we define the general objectives of the organization type. Then, for each objective we defined the strategies, that is, the activities to perform in order to attain the general objectives, the expected outcomes, that is, the effects following the strategy's attainment, the organization performance indicators, that is, the criteria observed in order to establish if and how the objectives have been attained. In the second phase, we translated the expected outcomes in individual professional objectives. At first, we analyzed the existing processes of the reference organization's learning departments. Secondly, we defined the learning function process type. Then, the process was further detailed by itemizing each phase. At last, we identified the individual objectives related to the professional qualifications at the core of our researches. In the third phase, we defined the more relevant professional profile in the process. The output of this phase was a declaratory about the knowledge and abilities concerning the macro designer, that is, the professional profile our master is addressed to. In the fourth phase, we broke down the macro designer competencies in knowledge and abilities. So, we define the tree of the observable behaviors representing the actual learning need, that is, the set of the learning objectives to include in a training plan oriented to train the macro designers within the learning department. In the last phase, we tried to answer this question: is the actual learning need actually corresponding to what the target has to get in terms of knowledge and abilities? In order to answer this question, we carried out two activities. In the first, we determined the learning need by making use of different analysis tools. In the second activity, we compared the actual learning objective tree with the results obtained with this analysis. This comparison allowed us defining by difference a new learning objective tree concerning the objectives not offered by our students, that is, what the target must get through the training path. At this point, we can consider the learning need analysis completed. The general objective of the professional profile with the learning objectives ramifications will help us defining the guidelines for the master instructional design. For further information, you can contact us to these email addresses. Thank very much for your attention.